My wife mocked me at Thanksgiving, so I gave her a real shock. My wife mocked me at Thanksgiving, so I gave her a real shock. So I, third eye for year-old male, have been busting my ass at the district attorney's office for the past 8 years, working my way up from nothing. I started as an assistant DA right out of law school, handling misdemeanors and cases nobody wanted, and slowly climbed up to handling serious felonies. Not going to lie, I played college football at State, used to be in great shape, had pro scouts looking at me until I blew out my knee senior year. Had office life and a failing marriage slowly wore me down. My life before Sarah, my wife, the 30-year-old female, wasn't anything special. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood with parents who worked their asses off to give me and my sister opportunities they never had. Dad was a postal worker. Mom was a nurse. They pushed education hard, and I was the first one in my family to go to college. I met Sarah during my second year of law school when she was finishing her marketing degree. She was gorgeous, ambitious, and completely out of my league, or so I thought at the time. Looking back, I realized I was a catch, on track to become a lawyer, former athlete. No baggage, but somehow she convinced me that she was the prize. Anyway, I was at Thanksgiving dinner with Sarah, surrounded by her family who always treated me like I was some kind of outsider. Sarah's family is all about appearances. Her dad's a doctor, mom's never worked a day in her life, and her brother Mike is some kind of investment banker who loves to talk about his boat. Their Thanksgiving is always this formal affair where everyone pretends to be perfect while talking about people who aren't there. But turkey was dry as hell thanks to Sarah's mom, Linda, who thinks salt is too spicy. But I was making the best of it. I was deep in conversation with Mike about the recent changes in state law when suddenly Sarah's voice cut through the whole damn room. "Oh, come on," she said with this condescending smirk I'd grown to hate. "You guys should be thankful. At least you have something exciting going on. I can't say the same for what happens in our bedroom." The whole table went silent. Then her cousin Ong started this awkward chuckle that spread around the table. I saw her mom purse her lips in that disapproving way, but she said nothing. Our dad suddenly became very interested in cutting his turkey. Mike had the decency to look embarrassed for me. I felt the blood rush to my face, but kept it together. What was I supposed to do? 'Cause a scene at Thanksgiving? Make her look bad in front of her precious family? So I just took a long sip of my drink and acted like it. Didn't tear me apart inside. Tried to force a smile like, ha ha ha, yeah, good one. But I'm pretty sure it came across as a grimace. The conversation awkwardly moved on. Her Aunt Patricia started talking about some charity gala, and slowly the tension dissolved. But I wasn't really there anymore, you know? I was just going through the motions for the next 2 hours, nodding, fake laughing, refiling my drink glass way more than I should have. I caught Mike giving me a sympathetic look at one point. He docked me, that he seemed to think Sarah had crossed a line. I just gave him a slight nod like, "What can you do?" and kept drinking. The thing is, this wasn't just a one-off comment. This was the culmination of years of this. Sarah had a pattern of humiliating me in public, but this was the most direct and degrading one yet. Usually, she was more subtle. Little jabs about my career progress, my appearance, my family's background. But I guess she decided to go for the jugular this time. By the time dessert came around, I was mentally checked out. I remember staring at the pumpkin pie, thinking about how miserable I was and wondering when exactly I had become the shell of a person who just took this kind of treatment. And something snapped in me that night, not in a dramatic table-flipping way, more like a quiet realization that I wouldn't live like this anymore. After everyone finally left our house around 10 p.m., I was in the kitchen washing dishes, replaying that humiliating moment over and over. We had this nice suburban home that we bought 3 years ago, the kind with stainless steel appliances and granite countertops that Sarah insisted on, because that's what successful people have. Tonight, it felt more like a prison than a home. Sarah waltzed in, humming some song from the radio like nothing happened, collecting empty wine glasses. She still had her host smile plastered on, the one she uses for guests but never for me when we're alone. "So, that little joke at dinner?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I scrubbed cranberry sauce off a serving platter. "Was that really necessary?" She barely glanced at me, putting the glasses in the sink. "Oh my god, Jake, don't be so sensitive. It was just a joke. Just a joke, right?" Because publicly announcing to her entire family that I'm inadequate in bed is comedy gold. They joke about humiliating me in front of your entire family. "You're hilarious, Sarah." I could hear the edge in my voice, but I was still trying to keep it together. She rolled her eyes and let out this exasperated sigh like I was some oversensitive child she had to deal with. "Please, nobody even cared. They're acting like I committed some terrible crime." Everyone was laughing. It wasn't a big deal. It was a big deal to me. I turned to face her, still holding a soapy dish. "How would you feel if I made a joke about your sexual performance in front of my family?" "That's different," she scoffed, grabbing a bottle of wine that still had some left in it. "How is that different?" "It just is." She poured herself another glass. "And anyway, your family would never have a fancy enough dinner for that scenario to even happen." And there it was, another dig at my family, who she always thought were beneath her because my dad worked for the post office and my mom picked up extra nursing shifts to put me through college. My parents, who had been married for 35 years and still held hands, who might not have had fancy dinners but never publicly humiliated each other. That's when it hit me. This pattern had been going on since we got married. The little digs about my salary, even though I made more than enough to support our lifestyle. Comments about how I'd let myself go compared to her CrossFit buddy husband. Always implying I wasn't good enough. Always in front of people, never when we were alone. Always setting me up as the punchline. You know what, Sarah? I'm done with this conversation. I put down the dish and dried my hands. You're incapable of understanding how your actions affect other people, and I'm tired of trying to explain basic human decency to you. Her eyes widened a bit. I rarely talk back to her like this. What, owe you someone's being dramatic tonight? Is it that time of the month for you? She smirked at her own joke. I just stared at her for a moment, seeing her clearly maybe for the first time in years. She wasn't the beautiful, confident woman I'd fallen for in law school. She was mean, shallow, cruel even, and I put up with it for too long because I thought that's what a good husband does. You weather the storms, you compromise, you make it work. But the man staring back at me in the kitchen window, reflection looked beaten down, a shadow of who I used to be. The guy who used to command a courtroom now couldn't even stand up to his own wife. A former linebacker who used to intimidate opponents across the line of scrimmage now hunched his shoulders and took emotional hits with no defense. I walked out of the kitchen without another word, leaving her with the rest of the dishes. Small rebellion, but it felt like a first step. That night, I couldn't sleep. Sarah was passed out next to me, Wide and Turkey doing their work. I kept staring at the ceiling, thinking about how we got here. It didn't start this way. First year of marriage was good. We were both building our careers, and great sex talked about our dreams. But slowly, things changed. Sarah started hanging out with a different crowd. Wives of doctors and executives who spent their days at spas and planning charity events they didn't actually care about. She got a job at a prestigious marketing firm and started caring more about appearances than substance and me. I just wanted to do good work, make a difference as a prosecutor. I wasn't interested in office politics or climbing the social ladder. Sarah saw that as a lack of ambition, started making comments about how I should network more and dress better and aim higher. But I pushed back, saying I was happy with my career trajectory. She'd deck like I was settling for mediocrity. I kept thinking about how Sarah had slowly chipped away at my confidence over the years, how she'd drill her eyes when I talked about my cases at work, how she'd joke with her friends about having to train me like a dog, how she'd compare me to her ex Jason, who apparently was some kind of sex god according to her drunk stories at parties. Stories she'd tell while I was standing right there. And I just took it, made excuses for her. She had too much to drink. She's just joking around. She doesn't mean it. But lying there in the dark, I couldn't make excuses anymore. The Thanksgiving comment was just too much. I got up at 500. Way before Sarah would wake up, especially with the wine she'd had. She wouldn't be up until at least 10. I didn't bother being quiet. I just grabbed my gym bag that had been collecting dust in the closet for 2 years and headed out. My old college teammate Derek ran a boxing gym across town. We'd been close during college. He was my linebacker partner, had my back on and off the field. After my knee injury ended my potential pro career, he'd been there for me. But we drifted apart after I got married. Sarah thought he was a bad influence because he was single and ran a lowbrow business for words. The last time I saw him was at a mutual friend's wedding 2 years ago, where Sarah had gotten drunk and made fun of his date's dress within earshot of everyone. The gym was in an industrial part of town. Not fancy, but real. Heavy bags hanging from the ceiling. A ring in the center. Weight tracks along the wall. It smelled like sweat and determination. Walking in, I felt embarrassed. I used to bench 225 for reps, used to have a six-pack, used to command respect when I walked into a room. Now I was soft, tired, and pissed off. A few early morning regulars were already there, mostly guys who looked like they worked construction or other physical jobs, getting their training in before work. Some nodded at me, others ignored the newcomer. Derek was in the ring with some teenage kid, holding up focus mitts and shouting encouragement. He looked good, still built like a tank, but with some gray in his beard now. He spotted me and did a double take. "Dake, holy man," Derek called out, ducking between the ropes and jumping down from the ring. "Thought you died or your wife put you on house arrest." I forced a smile as he pulled me into a bear hug. Something like that, caught time to help a husband get back in shape. Derek held me at arm's length, looking me up and down with a critical eye. I knew what he saw. I'd put on at least 40 pounds since college, most of it around my middle. My once broad shoulders now slumped forward, but there was no judgment in his eyes, just concern. "But you always, brother." He clasped my shoulder. "But what brought this on? Sarah finally give you permission to have a life again?" That comment hit deeper than he knew. "Something like that," I repeated, but there was an edge to my voice that made Derek raise an eyebrow. "All right then," he nodded, understanding without me having to explain. That was always our dynamic. He could read me better than most. "Let's get to work, go change, and we'll see what you remember." As I headed to the locker room, I caught a glimpse of myself myself in the mirror, dress shirt straining at the buttons, dark circles under my eyes, a stranger looking back at me. But somewhere in that stranger's eyes, I saw a flicker of the old Jake, the one who didn't take from anyone, the one who fought for what he believed in. That was the moment I really decided that I was going to change. Not to save my marriage, but for me. The first week of training was absolute hell. My body screamed with every punch I threw. My lungs burned after just a few minutes of movement. My shoulders felt like they were tearing apart when I tried to do even a fraction of what I used to. I started coming in every morning at 500 a.m., putting in work before heading to the office. Then I'd come back after work for another session. A regular started to recognize me, giving me nods of respect for the consistent effort. There was this one old guy, Frank, probably in his 60s, but still built like a brick house, who would sometimes give me pointers. Twist your hips more on that right cross, or keep your guard up, son. Derek hooked me up with a nutrition plan. You're eating light. That's half your problem, he told me bluntly. All that takeout and processed crap is making you soft. I cut out all the processed Sarah kept Stark and I prepping on Sundays. Chicken, steak, fish, veggies. Sarah noticed but didn't say anything at first, just watched me with this confused look as I packed my lunches instead of eating with takeout she'd order. What are you doing? She finally asked on the third Sunday of meal prep. Making my lunches for the week, I said, without looking up from the containers I was filling. Since when do you cook? Since now. She hovered in the kitchen doorway. Is this some kind of New Year's resolution or something? It was early December. Nope. She waited for me to elaborate, but I didn't. This was my new approach. Minimal engagement. No more long explanations, no more apologies for doing what I wanted, no more seeking her approval. After 3 weeks of consistent training and clean eating, I started seeing changes. My face looked less bloated, my clothes were a little looser, I had more energy. People at work commented that I seemed more focused, more assertive in court. One night, Sarah was waiting up when I got home around 9 p.m., and she was sitting on the couch in the living room, still dressed in her work clothes, an empty wine glass on the coffee table. "How have you been?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the edge in her voice. "Out," I said, heading toward the stairs to shower. "With who? Friends?" She laughed, that mean little laugh she does when she thinks she's caught you in a lie. Friends," she said, but the laugh died when she saw my face. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and turned to her. "I do now," I said, and continued up to the bathroom. I heard her follow me upstairs, hovering outside the bathroom door as I stripped off my gym clothes. "You've been acting weird for weeks, Jake. Going to the gym, cooking your own food, staying out late. What's going on?" I turned on the shower. "Nothing's going on. I'm just making some changes." "What kind of changes? Why?" I looked at her directly. Perhaps the first time in months I'd really held eye contact with her. "Because I want to." She blinked, surprised by the directness. Is this because of what I said at Thanksgiving? Are you still upset about that?" "I'm not upset about anything," I said calmly. "I'm just living my life. But Sarah, I need to shower. It's been a long day." I closed the bathroom door in her face, another first. Usually I'd leave it open, let her come and go as she pleased, let her continue the conversation while I showered. Not anymore. I needed boundaries, and I was finally setting them. Later that night,